Good morning, everyone. This is Brian Bohm with Network Consulting Services Incorporated. I'd like to welcome you to our Palo Alto presentation. We appreciate your attendance this morning. I think you're going to find this to be very informative. I know you guys probably attend a lot of webinars over time, and there's a lot of material out there that kind of is noise in the marketplace. I think you'll be happy with what you see here. We are very excited about Palo Alto and the impact it's had on the market. Just so that you all know, you're all in listen-only mode on the webinar, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to answer questions. You'll probably notice that you have a box where you can type questions or chat. Dave Lamson from NCSI is moderating on that side, and he will keep an eye on the questions as they come in to make sure that we get good question and response time. We'll have enough time to do that, so please ask questions. As we go through this, what I'd like you to pay attention to, and part of the reason we're so excited about this, is Palo Alto is what we call a disruptive technology. Every once in a while, there's the marketplace as it becomes more mature and evolves. A product will come along that is unique in its presentation and it's unique in its abilities. I think you guys remember, enough of you on the phone calls here to remember previous to like VMware, where the world ran computers for decades the same way. VMware comes, they disrupt the marketplace and actually shift the way we actually look at how we run our servers. Think about that the same way in the firewall world. The edge security, the perimeter security. For the longest time, the firewalls have been boring packet inspectors. You have to have one, but there's just nothing interesting about them. And in fact, as evolution came around, people would have to buy additional appliances to help plug the holes that firewall just simply didn't address. Things like intrusion prevention systems and web filtering and other things. And the market has attempted to adopt what the term they use is next generation firewall, where a lot of the companies coming out and saying, oh, we can put all these things in one box. Putting them all in one box isn't the trick. That's software. As you pay attention to what's going on in this webinar, keep an eye on how Palo Alto has attacked the problem and where you'll see how the marketplace is shifting and how we have people that have been long-time Cisco firewall users, Fortinet firewall users, Checkpoint firewall users, even to the point of having their unified threat manager and their combined systems running towards Palo Alto. I mean, it's actually been a little bit of a shock to us as well. I mean, we could see it from the technology, but the adoption rate is phenomenal. And I think you'll find today that your interest in the product is well-founded, and your ability to see it, as Brian will talk a little bit later, is very easy to even test. So I'm going to turn the time over to Brian. Brian Hodzik is our CTO, one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet on the planet, and I'm pleased to be associated with him. I will turn the time over to Brian now.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate everyone attending today. For those of you who don't know who NCSI is or what we do, I'd like to spend a minute kind of telling you what's special about us, different from other resellers out there. We are an engineering-focused company. We want to make sure that we are very, very good at the technology we represent. We don't want to be a company like CDW that sells everything but is good at nothing. We want to have trained engineers, trained sales staff, to be able to support the products long past just initial purchase. We don't want to be that vendor that just calls once a year to ask about a renewal. We want to make sure that you're engaged, the product works well for you. If you have questions, you can ask them of us, and we can help you out with these implementations. So we do represent several other products you can see on the screen here. Just a quick around, we do HP server storage networking, LANdesk for systems management, endpoint management. Today we're talking about Palo Alto Networks, obviously. eVault for backup and disaster recovery. VMware and Citrix for virtualization, application virtualization, server virtualization. WebSense for internet security, and Digital Persona for biometric authentication. So, but today we're focusing on Palo Alto Networks. So I want to spend some time talking about what makes Palo Alto special, and then I want to jump into the console and show you a little bit more about how it works and how it looks in a live environment. So Palo Alto, let's kind of talk a little bit about the history of where they came from. They're a relatively new player to the game. They were first shipping product in 2007, and so for a relatively new company, they are disrupting the marketplace. I remember back in the mid-2000s or late 2000s, the firewall game had become extremely stagnant. Generally speaking, people didn't change. If you were a Cisco ASH shop, you just bought another ASA when the previous one was out of warranty. If you were a checkpoint shop, you did the same thing. Rarely did people come and competitively analyze their infrastructure for perimeter security when the renewals came around. They just, rubber stamped it and said, let's go forward with this. Palo Alto has definitely thrown a curveball to everyone. They've kind of reinvented the firewall from the ground up and forced everyone to look at it in a different light. And as you can see from a growth perspective in terms of number of customers that they're adding year over year, it is extremely exciting to see the kind of growth of Palo Alto of what's happening. I'm going to explain a little bit further in the future, but Palo Alto comes and has kind of put a new spin on the firewall and kind of reinvented it from the ground up. What that poses as a challenge to the legacy vendors, the checkpoints, the Fortinets, the Ciscos, the SonicWalls of the world, is they put Palo Alto's put them in a very difficult position because we have a new way of looking at it. If these existing vendors want to adopt this new mentality, they're going to put their existing legacy customers kind of in jeopardy. And so they're pushing this technology aside, saying, well, you probably don't want to look into this, just kind of keep the way you're going. If they come and say, yes, let's adopt this newer technology, it's going to alienate their existing customers that they have today, and they're going to be behind the times because Palo Alto's already been shipping product for many, many years. A good example of this is the Cisco CX series that touts to have many equivalent features to Palo Alto. However, it was kind of a flop. We have a lot of customers that attempted to implement it, just couldn't get it to work. It was constantly crashing. It's just their technology is in their infancy. So we're going to expand more upon what those differences are here in a little bit. So let's talk about how firewalls work today and how the web has changed today. So the stateful inspection firewall, as we know it, was invented in the 90s. Try and remember back, what did the web look like in the 90s? If you can remember that far back, it was such a far difference from what it is today. It was extremely basic. It was extremely static. It was relatively secure. The world has changed. Firewalls have not. So right now, firewalls just understand ports. They say, well, port 80. That's web traffic, right? Well, it's probably web traffic. It usually runs on port 80, but think about what all that traffic really can entail. It can entail anything from Facebook to Twitter to YouTube to Dropbox. All of these, we're going to call them applications, run over a very specific port. So our traditional firewalls simply opened up an individual port and kind of opened up the floodgates to what was allowed on that particular port. So we're worried about things coming in. What happens if when you open that port 80, it's going to potentially allow you to get malware infections, inadvertently downloading malicious software, other exploits coming in from these different applications. What if you're worried about copyrighted material coming in via BitTorrent on something that is evasive? It's not always on the same port. It can run on port 80, it can run on port 5000, it can jump around all day long, so it's difficult to kind of pin down. Also, what about our information getting out? What if we're concerned about data on the inside going outbound and escaping on a common port? Again, we would potentially allow port 80 or port 443, and if you allow port 443, you've just allowed someone to get to Gmail. It's encrypted. They can upload whatever they want via that mechanism, and you have no visibility into it. So in addition, just like I described with SSL, it's becoming more and more prevalent. Facebook is going to turn on SSL by default. If you're logged into any Google service, it's turned on by default. Twitter's SSL is default. So all of this information in a traditional port-based firewall is going to miss all this traffic. It's going to see, that's port 443, that's SSL, and that's the end of the knowledge of what traffic is going across there. That's all we know. We need to have an answer to all of this SSL traffic. So how we've approached it in the past, and how vendors have approached it in the past, is they have created this this kind of chain of applications or services or appliances to try and solve this problem. So first of all, on the left-hand side, you have your traditional firewall, your port-based stateful inspection firewall. We added on intrusion prevention system. So this is a piece of the puzzle that would look for security threats. If someone's running a port scan, if someone's running an exploit over a particular port. So we added intrusion prevention in the middle there. We added DLP because we were worried about our sensitive information, credit card numbers or something like that, leaking out. We added identity management so we could detect, oh, this particular user is on this particular IP address. We added inline antivirus so that we can detect whether we have antivirus or spyware information coming across our ports. We added URL filtering so that we can manage and make sure that people aren't going to websites they're not supposed to, and proxy technologies. Well, there's one approach that some vendors have taken, and they've called it Unified Threat Management, or UTM. So this is a popular term in the industry. What really has happened is instead of unifying those technologies, what we're doing is we are actually just simply stacking them all in the same box. And they're not playing nicely together. They are just simply a single box that's doing all of these separate discrete functions without passing any information between the two of them. So that's what's happening in these unified threat management boxes. That's Palo Alto Networks is not a UTM device. It is better than UTM. So let's talk about why that is. What's the problem with having all these individual boxes? Geez, can you imagine the management, the cost of spreading all of these out? Plus, they don't actually do the job that they're intended to do. So what's different about Palo Alto Networks, and how are we doing it differently? Well, first of all, we're going to identify the application regardless of port protocol or evasive tactics. So, for example, I don't care if I see HTTP traffic going across port 81 or port 8080 or port 443. It doesn't matter. I can identify that traffic as type of HTTP versus, 80, that means it must be HTTP. I can detect it even if it's under SSL. We'll talk about how it does SSL decryption. So even if it is going across port 443, it is encrypted. We can still see inside of that to protect our edge users. If it uses evasive tactics, it's something like BitTorrent that jumps around and is difficult to understand, difficult to pin down, that uses other common ports, BitTorrent jumping on port 80, for example. We're always going to be able to identify the application. Next, we always want to be able to identify the user regardless of where they're at, what IP address they're on, what kind of device they're on, what their location is. So the old mentality that the firewall knows ports and IP addresses is going away. We don't just have to say this IP address is allowed to go here. We can do it based on user or group. I can say the sales department is allowed to go here. The Bob in sales is allowed to go here instead of our classic IP address only. We're going to protect against known and unknown threats. We'll talk about the known and the unknown here in a little bit, but known is things like antivirus signatures, spyware, IPS, those kinds of exploits and malware that is known to us and is out there today. And we'll talk about unknown threats a little bit later. And fine-grained visibility to control these application access and functionality. For example, Facebook. Facebook is not Facebook. It is Facebook Games, Facebook Apps, Facebook Chat, Facebook Pictures, Facebook Commenting. Very specific inside of that application instead of just bulk allowing or bulk disallowing. We could get fine-grained control over that. And high-end throughput. We'll talk about the different models and speeds and so forth a little bit later. So we use three core technologies, and this is the big differentiator for Palo Alto Networks from everybody else. We have App ID, that's the ability to identify the application. We have User ID, that's the ability to identify the user. And we have Content ID to scan the content and look for any threats or URLs or data that is being leaked out. So these are the three pillars of what Palo Alto Networks is doing that is different from everybody else. So why can we do it better? than the competition that touts that they can do all of these same things? Well, we do it with a single pass parallel processing architecture, or single pass as we call it. The idea behind that is we are going to send that packet or that stream of packets through our policy engine and look for all of these things at the exact same time. So one of the absolute fundamental flaws of every other technology, UTM or the independent architectures we saw a couple of slides ago, is that every one of their processing engines lives by itself in its own little silo. The firewall looks for ports. Then it passes the traffic off to the IPS blade, and the IPS component then has to do everything on its own. It starts over from scratch. Okay, well, I don't know anything about the firewall, the port information. I'm just past this traffic and supposed to look at it. And then the same thing happens when I pass it over to the antivirus engine. The same thing when I pass it over to the spyware engine or the DLP engine or the URL engine. These don't integrate with each other. So when the traffic flows through these boxes, they're kind of making a lot of U-turns going through different processing engines, and nobody passes information between each other. And so we waste a lot of time, we waste a lot of resources, and we lose a lot of visibility. Great example is like SSL decryption. If we do SSL decryption at the URL filtering layer, that's great. We're absolutely protected from URL filtering, but we didn't do it at the IPS layer. So if something's running across SSL, we completely lose out on the visibility of that particular component. So doing it all in a single pass is extremely important to us. So what are some of the benefits of classifying the traffic in the firewall layer? So let's take, for example, a traditional firewall. You wanted to allow port 80. Well, you didn't really want to allow port 80. What you want to do is you want to allow particular applications. So let's say you wanted to say, I want to allow Facebook as an application. Well, it's going to be a single firewall rule. We don't need to have an additional rule to allow the associated traffic. The idea behind that is you don't need to go create a rule called let me allow port 80 and then allow Facebook on top of that. It's all of the mechanics on the back end. Palo Alto Networks understands that Facebook requires port 80, or more likely 443 if we're doing encryption with Facebook. It allows that traffic to pass through as well. And so instead of creating two rules, we're creating a single rule to allow a particular application. It follows the traditional firewall model of saying you want to allow one thing and deny everything else. Deny it unless it's specifically allowed. We're able to do that with our with classifying it at the individual firewall layer. How would we do it in the alternative? How do we do it today? What is the problem with it? Well, here's what you would do. You would go to your firewall and you would create your first policy, and you would say, I need to allow port 80. And what happens is, all of a sudden, you just open up the floodgates to all of these different applications. These are, Facebook, Google Apps, and LinkedIn, and Tumblr, and Twitter. You've opened up the entire spectrum of applications that run over port 80. Well, what you need to do then is go to your second application and turn on a policy decision to allow Facebook. So you have to do it in two different locations, so two different policy decisions right there. But then on top of it, you've just now, allowed the rest of anything that runs across port 80 as well. So it takes more work for you to be able to go in and create these applications and create these rule sets and maintain these rule sets. But then you've also just opened up a lot more than you probably wanted to, because you had to go and open up at the firewall level, and your firewall didn't know what Facebook was. It only understood the port, and that's the fundamental difference between traditional technologies and what we do with Palo Alto Networks. So you would have two different policy decisions, two different databases where we store this information, and we don't have the ability to block that unknown traffic. We're just kind of allowing everything across on port 80. So what this gives us the ability to do is allow user-based actions for particular applications that we want. For example, an authorized finance user can use the Oracle application. An authorized sales user can use WebEx, but that doesn't allow them to use BitTorrent or Tor or something like that. You can individually itemize what departments, what users, what people you want to run particular applications. Now, does this stop us from using the old classic mentality of allowing a port to a particular IP address? No. We still function as a traditional firewall. That's really important for things like migrations. We can't expect you to dump your firewall today and reinvent it from scratch overnight. We can import policies, and we can have our traditional allow it from this subnet to that IP address on this port. We can easily allow that. And then migrate slowly, one rule at a time, to doing it the more efficient way of individually picking on, allowing particular users or groups or Active Directory OUs to run particular applications. So again, our three pillars from App ID, User ID, and Content ID. The applications, we need to identify the applications at all layers, not just the firewall layer, not just the IPS layer, not just the antivirus layer. We want to have that application identification labeled at all layers of the protection in our firewall. Second of all, we need to understand what users are. We can still do traditional IP addresses, but it's much better to actually look into that, look into several different systems, talk to Active Directory, comb your syslog servers, look at your Exchange Outlook Web Access logs. We use all of these methods to suck in information for us to identify who that end user is. We even have a captive portal to challenge them with the username and password. All of these methods give us the ability to apply all of these different rules to a user versus only being able to do it to an IP address or a subnet. And lastly, content. Just because we've allowed them to a particular application doesn't mean that we need to open up the floodgates and they can do whatever we want. We need to analyze every piece of that content across all of the different applications and look for known threats and unknown threats. Again, known threats, intrusion prevention information, like let's pick on Heartbleed. So if your servers were vulnerable to Heartbleed and you didn't have the ability to patch them in time, there was a intrusion prevention signature for Heartbleed that could block that. The new Internet Explorer vulnerability that came out over the weekend. If you haven't patched all your Internet Explorer versions, I think it was every single version of Internet Explorer was vulnerable. Until you get that patched, we have a signature that's a known threat that we can categorize with Content ID and potentially block. Let's talk about unknown here in a little bit and how we can protect against that. So 3 pillars: App ID, User ID, and Content ID. This is very similar to the conversation we had a little bit ago about allowing Facebook and what that's going to happen when you just have to allow port 80 through your firewall and then have a separate device step in to do individual application control. Same thing happens with IPS. If you do it at your port-based firewall and a separate IPS, it's a 2-step process. Even if it's a UTM device, again, they just shoved it in the same box. They didn't actually unify the technology. They just said, I'm going to have a port-based firewall look at it, then I'm going to pass that track over to an IPS and let it take over. Here's a little bit more about our architecture. We have a control plane and a data plane. In the data plane, our signature match we have based on IPS, virus, spyware, and in the security processing plane, we have SSL decryption, session setup, IPsec, things like that. So there's a little bit more about what the architecture looks like. We take over all of the functions of a traditional firewall as well. Sure, we have all these cool whiz-bang features that are different than everybody else, but we do just the same amount of firewalling and traditional firewall stuff that everybody else does. Dynamic routing, layer 2, layer 3 switching, VPN, SSL VPN, IPsec VPN, quality of service, high availability, virtual systems where you can slice up a physical firewall to multiple virtual firewalls. Quality of service is pretty cool. Everybody knows about quality of service. It's been around for a very long time, but it's the dumbest thing out there. Again, since it's not unified, you're doing it at a traditional network, meaning IP address and port level. So what are you going to do? Go in and do QoS and say port 80 has the following QoS. Port 80 has a huge amount of traffic running 300 different applications. We have the application intelligence at all the layers. You can go in and easily say Netflix is a different quality of service than the SAP application or Salesforce or whatever applications that you're using. We can detect those at the application layer, apply quality of service to that, so that you're not just applying quality of service at a dumb port. You can get very specific, very application-centric. Streaming media, streaming video, those kinds of things can be have a lower QoS priority than business-related applications. Where can you implement Palo Alto Networks? Well, it can be on the perimeter, where a traditional firewall would sit. It can be in the data center, where we're going to network segmentation. There's a concept called zero trust, where you shouldn't trust anyone. You shouldn't trust your servers. You shouldn't trust your workstations. No more of this inside is good, outside is bad methodology. Inside is bad. Clients are not to be trusted from the servers. So with data center, a lot of people will segment out their workstations from their servers, get great visibility into what's going on, and then potentially start blocking it so you can easily control access between those different network segments. A great example of people trying to do that in the past is, saying, well, geez, yeah, let's do that. Let's firewall off our servers from our clients. Now, our workstations need to talk with Outlook to the server. Okay, well, what port does it work on? And what happens when you go from Outlook 2003 to Outlook 2007, or they apply a service pack and the port changes? All of that is very easy within Palo Alto Networks because it's a signature. It's just a signature called Outlook, and we understand how that communication works between those two systems. And those signatures are updated on a weekly basis. So we can recognize the day that they come out with Outlook 2017 and it uses a new port, we're going to have that in the firewall and understood long before you're going to get your hands on that application to actually go and deploy it. Lastly is distributed enterprise. That could just be a combination of the previous, but then let's add on our branch offices, our remote users, so that we can kind of have protection not just at the main corporate HQ and in our data center, but our mobile devices, our branch locations can be protected as well. How can we deploy it? This is one of my favorite technologies, is where you can put it in place. So first of all, you can just do it for visibility. This, to tell you the truth, is great for proof of concepts. What we're going to do is we're going to put a Palo Alto Networks box, and we're going to sniff your traffic. We're not going to be in line. We're not going to stop any data. We're just going to look. We just do a span port or a mirror port on one of your switches at looking at data flowing maybe out to the internet or maybe flowing over to your servers, and we just watch. That's all we do. We can have that up and going in 20 minutes. It's extremely simple to be able to do that. The next option, the middle one, is transparent inline. This is great if a lot of people say, you know what, I have a firewall. I'm happy with it today, but I do need an intrusion prevention system. Well, great. Let's put Palo Alto Networks in as an IPS inline. We will go in and plug your firewall into the Palo Alto Networks, and then from the Palo Alto Networks into your internal network. We just go in and configure the interfaces into something called virtual wire, which makes it transparent, meaning you don't need to create a layer 3 hop for this data to go across. We just are invisible, no routing, no IP address necessary. But since we're inline, we can do quality of service. We can drop packets. We can identify data. We can do all of that kind of information because we are, all those actions because we are inline. And then lastly is the firewall replacement, the full, hey, go chuck out your ASAs and let's replace it and do all of the functions, including IPsec and SSL VPN. We have a lot of customers who start with this transparent inline and then move to full firewall replacement once they feel comfortable with the interface. And it's a great transition plan for people who want to step into it. So lots of different deployment options. We have something called Global Protect. Global Protect is a great way to protect our remote devices. So what we do is we go throw a small agent on your mobile devices, laptops or desktops that can go outside the organization. And we get SSL VPN. So, traditional SSL VPN for the user to tunnel back in and get access to their internal applications. But we can take it a step further and actually take a look at that machine and look at the patch level and see if they have encryption enabled. Make sure they don't have spyware, before they connect. So we can take it to the next level of not just a VPN where the user goes and turns it on or turns it off at will and they're in charge. We can be in charge and say, no, we're going to automatically connect if you have the ability to connect so that you're constantly protected. So that's a component called Global Protect. Wildfire is probably one of the most unique things about Palo Alto Networks, and It's a really cool technology that not too many people have heard about before. So here's kind of the idea. I've said before, we have the ability to protect for known threats. Known threats are the Heartbleed bug and the Internet Explorer vulnerability and a virus that came out 6 months ago and spyware from 2 years ago. Those are all known. Those are surprisingly easy to detect within Palo Alto Networks. We have signatures for them all. The signatures get updated extremely frequently. Away we go. We have a problem with the concept of patient zero. So let's say that this Internet Explorer bug is out there. The Internet Explorer bug that came out last week, and for those that don't know, it was a pretty severe bug in all versions of Internet Explorer. It was released the patch was released over the weekend, and the disclosure was over the weekend. And we need to run and race to catch up. Now, it was disclosed on Saturday, I believe. When was the vulnerability actually created? For all we know, it could have been created 5 years ago. They could have written something in Internet Explorer, and it's been vulnerable for the past 5 years. However, we didn't know that it was vulnerable. It was unknown at that time. And so there's a chance that people have been out there exploiting this particular vulnerability for days, weeks, months, years. There's actually an underground market of that people pay for undisclosed vulnerabilities so that certain governments can use it to spy on their adversaries. So that technology is out there and happening today. What Wildfire is going to do is we forget about the known. If it's a known antivirus signature, great, we just move on. If it's not known, let's take any executable-like application, PDF, exe, batch file, Word documents, anything that would potentially have some malicious content in it, job applications. What we do is we analyze it with our engine to get a MD5 hash of it to see if we've ever seen this before. If we've never seen this application before, we have the potential to upload it to the Wildfire cloud. What happens is in the cloud, it executes that application against a series of VMs. So it's all automated, but it runs it, well, hey, I'm going to take this executable and I'm going to run it in Windows XP with Service Pack 2. And I'm going to see what happens. And it's going to analyze, oh, something got written to the C Windows directory. Well, why would you execute a PDF and have it write something to the C Windows directory? That is extremely suspicious. So even though we let the original PDF go through because we didn't know that there was malicious at the time, we can come after the fact and say, hey, we let that through an hour ago, but now it's turned out that it was malicious. We need to go clean that up, and here's the signature to prevent it from happening again, and we're going to distribute it to all the other Palo Alto Networks users that have Wildfire. So you all benefit from that kind of detection logic. So it helps out for those originally infected people that before it becomes publicly disclosed, before information really gets out and we're able to put signatures to it, we can still have that protection from 0 day. It's not perfect protection. Can't go back in time and block that PDF that came across, but we can at least alert and monitor and alert you to the fact that there was something malicious inside of it. So we upload to the Wildfire cloud, understand that logic, run those scans against it. If we find it malicious, everybody else benefits from that because a signature will go out to be able to block that, as well as you benefiting from them, they're benefiting from you. From a industry standard, if everyone's familiar with Gartner Magic Quadrant, this is the Gartner Magic Quadrant for next generation firewalls. As you can see, Palo Alto Networks is just about as far to the upper right as you can get versus a lot of the other players. What's really fascinating is there's actually a new version of this, Gartner Magic Quadrant. I don't have the updated slide, but Palo Alto Networks didn't move. It stayed pretty much exactly where it was at. However, every single other vendor, every one of them, moved down and to the left. I think Gartner's having a problem there. We can't move it farther and to the right and farther up without looking silly, and so they're having to shift everybody else down. When's the last technology, or when's the last time you looked at a Gartner slide that everybody else was moving down and to left? Usually it's kind of some are going up, some are going down, but Palo Alto is being recognized from Gartner and from from Forrester and NSS tests as recognized as a great next generation firewall, almost always heads and shoulders above the competition because of the things we've talked about today. Next, I want to talk about when we're comparing Palo Alto Networks with some of the competition. There's this real myth as it comes to the data sheet. Everyone's seen these data sheets before. So you're looking at a product, specifically a firewall. They come in and, I won't say what vendor this is, but it's one of their competitors. And look at what they rate this as. Up at the top, they're going to say large UDP firewall traffic, 518 bytes. They're going to promise you 80 gigabits of throughput. So that's what they're going to label this box. That's what they're going to put on the top. 80 gigabits. Wow, that is a lot of throughput. Who can handle that kind of traffic? This box is just an absolute monster. Well, let's dissect it a little bit more. Let's go through all the different components and look at what you're really getting. So first of all, look down there towards the bottom under where it says IPS throughput. So what they've told you is if you turn on IPS, now it's at 11 gigabits. So can you imagine what just happened? It went from 80 gigabits to 11. You are getting 14% of what they're advertising you. What if you went and bought a box of cereal that was very large and it only contained 14% of cereal inside of that? You would be shocked at how they were misleading you and considering that false advertising. Well, what about antivirus? You want to go to turn on antivirus with the proxy base? 4.3 gigabits. So that's 5% of the advertised throughput. So those two numbers are pretty tough to swallow until you look even further. What they don't tell you on these data sheets is that they are not cumulative, meaning 4.3 gigabits of throughput does not include IPS. So if you want to go turn on IPS and antivirus, it's going to be less than 4.3 gigabits. I'm not smart enough to do the math on that because you would need to add up the overhead associated with it. You're probably going to get 3 gigabits or 2.5 gigabits. So a box that was advertised as 80 to be actually, when you turn on the features that they're advertising, you're going to get 2 gigabits, 3 gigabits. I mean, that's just an absolute shock to what they're advertising versus what you're actually getting. So what does Palo Alto do? First of all, we do have a kind of a top-end advertised speed with one difference. We kind of put a note right there that says with app ID enabled. So the overall throughput, you can still do all the application identification. And you get that full rated 10 gigabits. It's not just large frame UDP packets. We have one other number, and it's the threat prevention number. If you go turn on all of the functionality, AV, IPS, anti-malware, Wildfire, you turn on 100% of those, and that's what the threat prevention throughput is. You'll notice it's almost always exactly half of the overall advertised throughput, and that's with everything enabled. So when a lot of people come to me and they say, well, geez, I'm looking at a ASA, XYZ, a 5550, and it's rated as 80 gigs of throughput, please give me a comparable Palo Alto. Well, I don't go and get an 80 gig advertised Palo Alto Networks. Look at this 10. This 10 gigs of throughput can actually really give you 5 gigabits, so it still outperforms this one right here. It's going to be twice as fast as this one. So you can't just do apples-to-apples comparison without doing a little bit more of a deep dive on what is exactly happening with those competitors' data sheets. You know what ends up happening most of the time with this? I've heard it countless times from customers. Well, we put it in, it didn't perform like we liked, so we just went and turned off that IPS and antivirus stuff. It just hurt the performance too much. Well, that's why you probably bought it. That's why you bought that UTM box to begin with, was to do all these extra features. Now you can't even really use it. So now I want to show you kind of a little bit of what the interface looks like. So this is the Palo Alto Networks management interface. What's great about it is that you're not going to have to learn everything from scratch. Sure, we have some great technologies here that are new and different, but if you've managed a firewall before, it's a small learning curve to be able to understand how to interface with the Palo Alto Networks. So here under the ACC, we have the ability to kind of give a great overall idea of what's happening in the network. So Whoops, it looks like it's logged me out. Sorry, let me log back in really quick. All right, so this is my quick dashboard that tells me, kind of what's going on, what information is happening. The ACC is giving me traffic over, in this case, it's showing me the last hour. It's going to show me the application name, for example, web browsing, DNS, BitTorrent, Nutella, SMTP. It's going to tell me the risk going from 1 to 5, what we believe is risky. Web browsing is a 4, Skype is a 2, NTP is a 2, but BitTorrent, that's a 5. Gives me more information about it. I can scroll down here and see my top URL filtering categories. I can see from a threat prevention perspective, from my IPS component, what kind of IPS traffic am I seeing? From data filtering, what information from a Wildfire perspective is happening. And it's very easy to drill down. I can say, well, tell me more about web browsing. Let me click on that. And you can see in the upper left-hand corner here, it kind of drills down into that particular component. Okay, now let's focus just on web browsing. First of all, it tells me information on the top here. Well, what ports does it use? Does it usually have excessive bandwidth? What's the risk? Is there vulnerabilities in it? It kind of tells me more about that particular application ID in the top here. Down here at the bottom, we have source IP addresses, source host names. Source users. I'm talking to Active Directory. I know exactly what these users are doing, what their bytes are, the number of sessions, what their host names that they're going to versus what the destination IP address is, countries from source and destination, what those categories are, and I can keep, and what the threats are on this particular, so here's all of the threats for web browsing. And I can keep drilling down. Okay, well, I want to know more about this this user right here that's using a little bit more traffic than everyone else. Let's drill down to that. So now I'm looking at web browsing for Patricia here, and I can see more about what the top destinations are, what categories. Well, Patricia is doing shopping. That explains why it's a little bit more, higher number of sessions. Well, I don't want to know just her web traffic. Let's look at the rest of it. So I can actually click this little X right here and turn off that particular filter. Now I'm looking at just Patricia and her information for all applications. And come up here and say, well, yes, it is web browsing, but we can recognize Flash as a separate application from web browsing, and Google Analytics is a different application than just generic web browsing, and Facebook and so forth. So very easy to kind of get a quick overview of what's going on inside of your network. If we go to the monitor tab, we can kind of dig a little bit deeper. So here's our traffic log. This is kind of a more traditional firewall-looking traffic log that is going to tell us the session ID and the source port, destination port. Was it allowed? Was it blocked? That kind of stuff. A little bit more of a deep dive on our traffic. You're not going to be looking at this generally too much, but our threat log is a different story. This tells us what we see from an IPS perspective. So you can see all of the different information here. If you click on one of them, we can expand it out. This particular one runs across the web browsing application. Here's the user that was affected by it. Here's the threat name. It was an HTTP unauthorized error. In this case, it's a severity. It's just an informational one. It's not a very critical one, but I want to know a little bit more about that. I want to know these critical ones. How do I get rid of informational? Well, if I just click on that, it's going to create a little filter up here at the top, and I can very easily sort for which ones are critical. So now I'm looking at just my critical threats. Looks like there's a command and control traffic for a particular piece of spyware. So this is absolutely something I'd want to be concerned about and want to be blocking. And so it's very easy to kind of filter down and apply these filters. You can kind of just click on them. Tells you a little bit more about it. If I want to go to the URL filtering section, I can see what users are browsing to what websites and what the categories are. Wildfire submissions. This is one of my favorite pieces. So again, I saw these applications. Application I usually thought is EXE. Well, it's more than that. It's anything that could potentially infect it. PDFs, Excel files, EXEs, PowerPoint. It's more than just what you think of when you think of executables. Well, let's go in and dig into one of them. Let's click on this and say, well, what happened here? This was a particular application that we had never seen before. And here's the MD5 hash of it. Here's the SHA-256 hash of it. We knew it was an Excel document. We'd never seen this before. So what happened was this information was uploaded to the Wildfire cloud, and this was all done automatically. We didn't do anything. It tested it out on a Windows XP machine with Adobe Reader 9.4, Flash 10, and Office 2007. And here's the different things that happened when that application ran. And we can see the registry keys that were created when we were when this particular thing was the action was taken. And so it even runs it on multiple virtual machines to see if it's there's a Windows 7 machine, for example, to see if it's vulnerable to a particular a particular operating system or another. You can also go and click on the virus total information that takes you to the virus total webpage. Says, hey, now we've gone and analyzed this against that one's not in their database, but a lot of this is test information. In the real world, it would actually show, hey, I ran against 50 other antivirus vendors and saw that it is vulnerable or is not vulnerable. So here we would be able to see what we're allowing, what we're blocking, and we can set up an alert to say, please send me a message, send me an email when something gets through. Here under our policies, this is where you go and create those individual policies. Again, it's not rocket science compared to how we created rules in the past. We have a source, we have a destination, we have an action. We just have a couple of new things. We have application. This is something that was kind of missing in our traditional firewall, is the ability to reference a particular application. But you can still do traditional services. This is where you do a port and an IP address. So it still can kind of use that traditional mentality. Same thing with NAT rules and QoS rules. It's very easy for us to go in and create rules. We have decryption. Remember, we do SSL decryption. This makes it so that we can see inside of those SSL sessions. We just do a kind of like what would be considered an SSL man-in-the-middle attack, where we still encrypt it between us and the firewall, and between the firewall and the internet, but we have it decrypted for a very short amount of time. This is actually cool. We can actually spit out that decrypted traffic to a third-party system. What if you had a third-party DLP system and you wanted that decrypted traffic? Palo Alto could do the decrypting, and then you could spit it off to a third party. If we come in here under applications, this is where you can see the real meat of how we identify what's going on. So you can see the number of signatures we have is in the thousands. You can kind of scroll through here and see all the individual ones, but you can come in here and say, well, I want to know more about Facebook. Tell me about Facebook, and get a little bit more specific. So Facebook is broken down into, well, there's generic Facebook, there's Facebook apps, chatting, file sharing. Well, that's a vulnerability right there. Facebook file sharing, it goes over these ports. It requires this first. They have to have Facebook base first and Facebook chat. But, it's risky because you can transfer files right here, transfer files. I can go in and block just Facebook file sharing and not other things. Again, if you have a traditional firewall or a traditional URL filter or a traditional IPS, what if they're turning SSL on? Facebook has a big initiative now to turn on SSL by default. If you're not doing SSL decryption at every single layer, you're going to be missing out on that traffic. That's the benefit of doing it with a single pass architecture, is we have access at every layer to that decrypted traffic to be able to see it. So I can go in here and say, yeah, well, I want to allow Facebook base and Facebook posting, but who cares about Facebook chat and apps and games? That's where users are wasting their time. Let's go and block those. Or, we can't do that because management says we have to allow it. Fine. Let's go and find Netflix, and let's take the streaming application, which is different from the base, because you can still get Netflix DVDs in the mail. That's what the website is. But then as soon as you start streaming, we can create a QoS rule surrounding Netflix streaming. You absolutely can stream, but we're going to throttle it down. We're going to make it so that it doesn't trump other types of traffic. All right, so that's kind of the console. Is there any questions that anybody has so far? Please type them into that question box. I'll talk about a couple of things while giving you a chance to ask some questions. One of the great things about Palo Alto Networks is the ability to show you everything that we see here today with very, very little impact on your network. If you remember back in our slide presentation, we had the ability to go and set it up as a monitor port, so we can actually go and just sniff your existing traffic. We can set it up in that way so that you can see almost everything you see here. The only thing we can't really do is block or do SSL decryption in this passive mode. But give me 30 minutes of your time, I bring an appliance on site, and you'll be able to see all of this about your traffic. And so most customers that do that are very, very impressed with what they see and how much visibility we have into their network. You can go as far as to do it actually inline and start blocking and so forth, but for proof of concept purposes, it takes no commitment, it takes no, you don't have to make a purchase order and we hold it, or there's very little commitment. You just need to say, hey, I want to see what's inside of my network. We bring the box out on site, we give you a great report that shows exactly what's going on in your environment. All right, well, no questions came up, so what that tells me, oh, here we go, we have a question. If using BitTorrent, can you tell the URL that was being used? Technically, no, because BitTorrent doesn't have URLs. They have trackers inside of it, but it works a little bit differently. We would be able to see the BitTorrent protocol. We'd be able to see the source and the destination, but we wouldn't be able to go in and say, oh, and we can tell that they're BitTorrenting a Linux ISO, and that's legitimate versus something that's illegitimate. So we don't have that deep of visibility into BitTorrent. It would just say BitTorrent-specific traffic. But if anything malicious was coming across of it, we'd still be able to tell. If it was a malicious executable or something like that, we'd be able to catch it with Wildfire and upload it. Any more questions? Does it connect with DNS? So yes and no. Well, let me change my mind. Yes and yes. So what we can do is we can, when we're looking at our application control here, or better yet, let's look at a monitor, we can have it do resolve host names right here down at the bottom. So if we check this box, it's going to go and these IP addresses, it's going to do reverse DNS lookups into what information that is. It just takes a little bit of time to go and resolve that. That's why it's just not on by default. But we also have some great, I'm going to have to go find it. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. We have this cool spyware detection that can kick in based on how DNS entries are being listened to. So particular pieces of spyware have started to use DNS as part of their command and control system. So they're trying to be evasive. Hey, let's not put a web page up that does command and control. Let's use DNS text records that nobody's really looking at and use that as part of our command and control system. So we're able actually to see that, look for DNS threats, and actually do passive DNS monitoring. See it actually trying to advertise out for DNS records that are deemed suspicious by us because we've seen it used in conjunction with other pieces of spyware. So hopefully this answers your question that yes, we integrate from DNS when we're looking up IP addresses and so forth, as well as yes, we have extra layers of control associated with looking for suspicious DNS traffic. Let's go back over here to monitor. I'm sure we can even find some. If we go to our threat section, let's see if we see any that right up top of the first screen or two that are DNS related. I don't see any. We might be able to do a search for DNS, but can't guarantee that. No, you have to create a rule like this and then say, I can't pull one up right now, but yes, you would have a record in here that says conflicker. Conflicker is a good example of something that uses suspicious DNS. We would be able to detect it. It would say right here, conflicker, and we'd be able to block that or alert you or take the appropriate actions from there. All right, any more questions? We're kind of running out of time here. What I would recommend is if you have particular questions or concerns, please let me know. My email address is this right here. I should have had it in the slide deck, but that's my address. It's just my first letter and my last name at ncsi.us. Also, you can contact your salesperson if you want to hear more about it. But what I definitely encourage is please take us up on our challenge of the proof of concept. You'll be very impressed with what information that you see. It takes very little commitment, very little time, and most people are very amazed with the data that they see on that comes out of that report. So thank you, everybody for attending. We appreciate it. If you have any feedback, please send it to this email address as well. You'll probably receive a survey as well. Please tell us if you want these kinds of webinars to be longer, shorter, more interactive, less interactive. We want to tailor them so that they're specific to what our customers want. So thanks, everyone, for attending. I appreciate it, and have a great day.